Okay, we are live. This thing is on. The red light's on the camera. Welcome to the studio. I'm Alan Levine, and you're here for another episode of OEWeek Live this week. This is number I can't remember because I've done so many of them, but the whole idea here was to run just kind of like a little talk show twice a day to talk to interesting people in open education or what is going on, because this is Open Education Week. And so we have a couple folks waiting in the wings here that I'm going to quickly bring on stage so I can just shut up and get out of the way. But for those listening in YouTube, we lost our one listener, so we're down to 0. But don't worry about that, folks. This is going to be great. So with that, I'll just ignore them, and I'm going to start bringing people into the stream and just say hello to some very fine people. And so welcome to the show. And, you know, if you feel like you made a mistake, you can exit at any time. Okay. So I'm gonna call out just to people at maybe a random order to say hello here. So I'm gonna stick to Kim because she came in first and we got to talk, and it's great to see you, Kim. I got to know you through Ontario Extend, and so tell us, you know, where you are, who you are, and what you do.
Yeah, thanks, Alan. Exactly. I remember meeting you. I think it's been almost 5 years ago now. So I am the Open Educational Resource Consultant at Conestoga College, and I'm coming to you from Kitchener, Ontario, Canada, where it is sunny right now, but we are expecting some snow.
Excellent. And I was going to try to get my link up there, and I'm going to bring on Jane because she's your colleague from Conestoga, and it's great to meet you, Jane. And what did Kim say to you to get you to do this?
Oh, she twisted my arm. She's good at that. Thanks, Alan. Yeah, I work with Kim at Conestoga College, and I'm a professor there in the International Business Management degree program, and teaching research courses and project management courses. So I'm happy to be here and share what we're working on.
That's great. And we'll say hello to Simon. And I'm just going to quickly put a link if you're curious about Conestoga College. I'll even get that on the screen. And really excited to hear about this project that you're working on. So thank you very much. And something's beeping, but I'm going to ignore it. So next, I'm going to go to my good friend and who I'm counting on to give me a lot of sarcasm, Todd Conaway. How are you today, Todd?
I'm good, and I'm just going to tell stories about Alan. I'm super excited. This is just going to be great. My name is Todd. I'm here in Seattle, where part of the year it's amazingly beautiful, and the rest it's just kind of drizzly, but beautiful nonetheless. I get to play with faculty. That they pay me to do that. I don't know why.
I got to know Todd back when I was at Maricopa in Arizona, and he's a super creative guy and does some brilliant things. He does more than play with faculty. So take it away. And then really pleased that my good friend Alex Enkerly, my good friend, we've never met except online, but you participate in everything I put out there. So I appreciate it. Hello, Alex.
Yeah, I tend to be willing and able to participate in stuff if people will have me. I don't want to overstay my welcome anytime. So Alex and Curly, I work for Collecto, which is a nonprofit in covering the whole education network in Quebec, mostly specialized on the college network and their tuition-free colleges throughout Quebec for the past 50 odd years. So we mostly work with them. And also we have like the main site that I use is called Eductive. So you can get that link there. It's bilingual. So we're waiting for Mustafa to come. If he doesn't, I'll tease him relentlessly for a while. But, part of the pretext is that we'll also speak in French a little bit at some point. But if not, that's okay to follow on in English.
Ici bon.
And, yeah. No?
Ici bon or something.
Yeah.
Like that. I won't torture you with my French. So really pleased to see that we have some new people in the studio. So they're probably wondering what the heck they are in for. But I'm Alan, and I set up this thing just as a means to have a little bit of informal, open conversation and try to like put some excitement into the long stream of webinars that are happening out there. Nothing against webinars. Some of my best friends do webinars. But I'm going to ask, and I'll probably, I don't want to mangle your name. Fatih, is it? Who's from Conestoga?
Correct, Fatih Helen.
Excellent.
Yes,
it's nice to meet
that's
you.
correct.
So Kim talked you into this, right?
Yeah, she did. She did. And to be honest, I've been watching you for the last 15 minutes, and I was waiting when you were going to put me on.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't hear the beep.
That's okay, sir. Oh, it's the beep. Maybe it was me. I don't know. I didn't
That's
know what
okay.
to do. I didn't know how to let you know, but it was a good conversation. I just listened to it. That's nice.
okay.
So yeah, I've worked with Kim and Jane at Conestoga College, Ontario, Canada, in Kitchener. As Jane said, really nice sunny weather outside. I was just outside, just picking my son, and just came in and then joined you here to talk about the Open Education Week. I'm very happy to be here.
That's fantastic. Thank you for doing this. And I won't show you the snow out my window. How about that? I'm in Saskatchewan.
Oh, okay.
And now, like, I'm really excited to see my good friend Chris Lott, who we haven't seen each other for like 1 or 2 pandemics, it seems like.
So, it feels like a couple pandemics
ago. Thank you so much for joining us, Chris.
Thanks.
Where are you, or what do you do?
I am at University of Washington, Tacoma. I'm the learning designer for the Office of Digital Learning there. I am currently actually in Boise, Idaho, where it's a little chilly, but no snow, so it's okay.
Excellent.
And so I'm just kind of here to chat about Open and maybe rant a little bit, time permitting. Who knows?
I'm kind of counting on that, Chris. But it's so good to see you.
Yeah.
So again, I don't really have a format. Like I know we have some projects and things that people want to share. I could ask you about how you're spending Open Education Week. I had the idea I was going to do like a 10-minute thing of like, coming up in the next hour is, or coming up in 5 hours. And then I thought like, okay, everybody here knows how to check the calendar. So I don't need to tell you that. So anybody want to share something that they've done this week of interest, or maybe a surprise session, or maybe you haven't done anything?
Well,
This is it.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I was going to say, this is it for me, and tomorrow, but that's part of my story. This is really it.
But this counts, Todd. Okay.
I'm counting it.
Okay.
Yeah, I am.
Okay. Do you want a badge or something? I'll make you a badge.
I don't need no badges. Man.
All right. I think Jane was talking too.
Well, I was just going to mention, I listened to one of the sessions this morning. That was Nate Angel, I think it was a Creative Commons, and it was just interesting. I learned a lot, even just from one session. I hadn't been able to attend most of the week, but I'll certainly watch some of the recordings. I really learned a lot from it, learned a lot about Open. It was the PhD candidate was there.
David.
Yes. Yeah. His comment, we say kind of like, what's your name and what's your concept of Open? And that was just a really, really interesting session. It resonated well with me. So that was my experience of Open Week so far.
Well, that's good. Anybody else want to chip in?
Yeah, one I attended today was about roles librarians play in creating OERs. That was in French at ETS, which is basically a technical university in Montreal. And it was very interesting to have that because, like, all the steps in the process. There's something in Quebec called Fabrique Réelle. I'll put the link as well, and Alan will share that. So what they do is they support the creation of OERs, and it's typically between pedagogical counselors, and librarians. So I think that there's really something to be done in the, interprofessional collaboration between librarians and pedagogues, basically.
Yeah. Does anybody not have like a heroic librarian at their institution?
On Monday, I attended the executive celebration and then we had a Jamboard with everybody's projects, and like the Jamboard was full and things were overlapping and people were so excited. And I really liked the concept of, we don't often celebrate our accomplishments. We don't often take the time to sit back and go, wow, look at all that was accomplished. So I thought that was like a really cool concept and something to keep in mind moving forward for sure.
Well, that's great. I mean, I'm not like taking attendance here for Open Education Week. And actually, I think I've only been to like 2 sessions because I came up with this stupid idea. But but actually, I'm getting so much out of talking to people that it's really worth it. So where do we go next? Do you want to talk about your project, Kim? Oh, wait, Todd.
Yeah.
Todd's raising his hand. We have an eager student.
I was going to say I'll go first, but I'm always that way. So Kim, if you'd like to go first, go ahead. Either way.
Go ahead, Todd. Go ahead, Todd. I'm the same. Jump in.
All right.
Boy,
well, here.
You got to like that when you're running something.
I have like an hour and a half, right? That's what you said, Alan. Like I have an hour, right?
In in time from the Mars universe.
Okay. Well, here we go.
Martian time.
Super fast. I am going to describe Todd's attempts at dragging informal learning into formal settings, particularly where faculty development happens. And informal things are free, right? Like they're open. Anybody can show up usually, and they're outside of the purview of whatever university you're at. So I've been completely unsuccessful in that, thankfully. And I'm going to tell you the story about how I bumped into an amazing informal learning opportunity that literally and this was like 12, 15 years ago, is happening tomorrow. So I'm going to tell you that story real quick. Once upon a time, when I first got into instructional design, I like wandered into the internet, and I think maybe Twitter may have been around, and I discovered this guy out there called Alan Levine. And I had some connectivity to these people in the field down in Phoenix who also knew him, but he had long since left. He'd gone off to some job at the New Media Consortium or something, but they talked highly about him. And so I started looking at what he was doing, and it was just like amazing. Like he was the Stephen Downes sort of Dave Cormier like level of people. He was just this amazing person out there. And I was brand new to the game, right? It was like, wow, look at what he's doing. I was so inspired. So few years go by, and I discovered this thing called the Cyber Salon. And what it was a bunch of teachers who met at bars once a month down in Phoenix. And they met once a month, and they'd been doing it for years. And Alan was part of that group. And so one day I got the courage up to go to one. I had to drive an hour and a half through the desert to get to this thing. And I get to this thing, and it's at this bar, and I'm like so nervous because I was from this little small town. And all these big, smart people are there, all drinking their beers. They all have laptops in front of them. And it was just like amazing. And there's an open seat. So I go sit at it, and I'm sitting next to this guy named Alan Levine. And I was just like shaking. I was so nervous. Thankfully, he's pretty nice. We ended up we did some bicycle races together, and we hiked to the bottom of the Grand Canyon together. So all these years later, life was good, and he turned out to be a nice guy. But the connectivity and the inspiration that I got from that guy over the years, and that sitting at a bar, hanging out with teachers, talking about stuff, was one of the most inspiring long-term things that's happened in my career.
Todd, you're making it seem like I paid you to be here.
Well, you want your money back? I'll give you your money back if you want.
That's the wrong script.
No, this is because it's amazing. Because I'm going to leave you out of the next part, except for your little.
Okay.
You are going to show up, I hope. So, what's happened here with me and my work today is that I've been part of a learning community that was, up until this last year, kind of officially recognized here at the college. We got some money, we had kind of some official recognition, and then for some reason they just dropped learning communities completely. However, our little learning community, all 6 of us, were so interested in teaching and learning on the open web that we've continued on. And I think the reason we've continued on is because somehow I have managed to get some amazing people to come and share epiphanies with our little group. And it's just like walking into that bar and sitting next to somebody amazing. I mean, it's on Zoom right now because, you know, Zoom is everything and all that, but it's still happening. And I'm still, I'm able to put people next to kind of my amazing colleagues here, next to these amazing people on the planet. If you look at the Epiphanies link at the UW Open Web, you can see the guests. Tomorrow, Alan and Elisa Cooper and Shelly Rodrigo are going to be sitting in our little learning community. And I am just super excited because I feel like in some ways I've kind of come full circle, pulling in just that willingness to sit next to somebody and doing it because you love what you do and because they're good people. And I just can't thank you enough, Alan. I'm not going to send you back your money, but I really feel fortunate like that I've been able to participate in this whole thing. And that's kind of how it started, was in a bar in Phoenix with beer and laptops. And it was like amazing.
Well,
that's my story. I'm going to stick to it. I don't care if you're embarrassed.
I am embarrassed because this feels like a setup. I do not need an ego stroke here, but I appreciate that because that was a remarkable time. And actually, it was Shelly Rodrigo's idea. She had that whole concept, and she's a brilliant. I was fortunate to work with some brilliant people at Maricopa, but wow, can anybody like say anything to like counter that? Chris, well, you have your hand up?
I don't necessarily want to counter that. I mean, I want to counter the Dave Cormier thing being up there. I don't know about that. But, I want to say that in a way, for me coming to UW, because I was at the University of Alaska for over 20 years, and I came to University of Washington just in time for the pandemic, which was awesome. But I was fortunate to connect with Todd. Todd has kind of been my Alan in this universe because he's had this community going, and I've been able to connect with it. And it's thankfully via Zoom for me because I don't have to drive through Seattle traffic if you've ever experienced that to get north. And it's been great because I've been able to connect with this group that's self-motivated to explore the open world. And so it's going to be great to see you tomorrow, Alan. It's been wonderful to see Jim Groom. All the guests have been fantastic, and it's just a lot of fun to hang out and learn. But that kind of leads me to 2 things I just wanted to mention. So for open, I haven't been able to attend many events because I've had some other things going on, but I did go to a session. I don't know if it was coming out of OE Global. I think it was coming out of the UBC and Thompson River University, but it was a session on kind of a caring approach to open education, open teaching. And it was really interesting and I think very valid because it was talking about taking into account kind of different cultural approaches to sharing and property and the idea of copyright and licensing. And in that sense, I think it was needed and useful. And I think it was Brenna Clark Gray is the person who presented it, and she's bright and it was awesome. That said, it led me to keep feeling the way I've been feeling about open education since the beginning. I've been doing this since before there was a thing called open education, right? So that's great. It's like, oh, hey, I'm doing this thing. It's open education. Awesome. Give me a badge. Give me a stamp. But everybody wants to talk about the definitions and argue about the definitions and create new ideas about how we might create another idea of open and countering the 5 R's with the 5 W's and the 3 C's, but nobody's making anything. Nobody's sharing anything they're actually doing from this. And I go back to this post from Scott Leslie that must be 15 years old. And it was called something, I feel like it was getting ready to just share already, basically, I think was the the basic message. Planning to share was, I think, what it was called, planning to share versus sharing. It's still as relevant as it ever was, right? I mean, everybody wants to make their bones on their new theory of open education and open learning and teaching. And I just want to see people making things and sharing them. And obviously you want to do it in a contextually appropriate way. And we're going to keep learning how to do it. And we're going to have failures, and we're going to have successes, and we're going to have, you know, challenges. We've all had those. But I just would like to see the focus moving from the idea of open, and not to say that that doesn't need to happen, it does, but we need much more emphasis on doing it, learning from, and doing it again. So that's where I'm at.
That's all good, but like, what are some things that you're doing now that you're getting to make stuff like?
Well, like for instance, so, you know, I'm pretty isolated where I am because I'm pretty much the only person outside of libraries who's engaged in open education. But for instance, I'm working with Marissa Petrich in our library and doing things about publishing with Pressbooks, which is one of the university-supported tools here, and bringing students into creating and publishing books. But, you know, so that kind of thing is what I'm engaged in doing and trying to facilitate and help faculty do it. This UW is kind of regressive in that sense. There aren't a ton of people who are engaged in open education. And so, I mean, I know that people are doing things, and I hope to keep hearing about it. But it just feels to me like for now 20 years, I've seen about 80%, you know, 80-20 rule, 80% talking about doing it and what it might be, and 20% actually doing it and sharing it. And it's just, it's hard to do, because when you're not, people aren't engaged in that en masse, there's no one for me to connect with who's doing it, you know.
What about bringing back the Motley postcards?
Yeah, I mean, there you go. So that was a fun project, right? That I put together where we were talking about Ulysses doing physical postcards and sharing them and then putting them up on Flickr. So it was kind of open teaching and learning experience using a physical media. I love that kind of thing. And I think a lot of DS-106 activities kind of build on that idea and work with that kind of idea as well. And that's fantastic too. I mean, you know.
Wait, we got
So
a speaker?
I have a deal for you, Chris. We have a way for you to get involved with us in our doing.
I love it.
And I'm going to set up my two colleagues to talk about the details. But what I want to share is that I've probably been doing open work longer than before I knew it was open. But I've been really heavily involved in open work for the last 5 years, publishing and helping others publish open educational resources. So about 1.5 years ago, the dean of the school that I was working in put me together with Jane to talk about this idea of case research and could we make it open. And I was introduced to this community of people that are involved in open case writing who have a lot of alignment with open people in general. So they have developmental workshops where they help and encourage other case writers to improve their cases to a point that they're ready for publishing. And so I was really excited to see that intersection of the two communities and how much alignment there was. So I'm going to set up Jane, because really this is her lead. In my role, I support people in what the publishing that they want to do. And so Jane, do you want to, and Fatih, between the two of you, do you want to talk about the Open Access Teaching Case Journal and all the wonderful work that goes into getting a case ready published with us?
Before we do that, just my simple mind, what do you mean by a case? I mean, I think it sounds like it has maybe a context there that I'm not missing.
I think Jane and Fatih can explain it best.
That's a good question. Okay, yeah. What do I mean? A case be like a situation, a kind of real world situation. It's case research, really, right? So you're examining a situation in an organization, and the idea is to apply a theoretical lens or a framework, because you want to teach it in the classroom. It's an educational resource. So a case is that situation that you choose, and it's always associated with an instructor's manual that has the theory that kind of helps say, how you want to apply the situation in the classroom, because it's really a setup situation to let students go through and analyze the situation. So that would be a case that we would publish in our Open Access Teaching Case Journal, as we published the cases. And we're so thankful to be connected with Kim. She makes them look so great. They're accessible. We can share them, because really the foundation came in my mind, from, as Kim mentioned, with our dean, kind of linking us together with our, principles for responsible management. We wanted to kind of share resources, create resources that we can share with our programs, but also with others. So then we develop the case research because we're a business school, and a lot of business schools will, use that case research approach. So we go through kind of building the kind of homegrown skills in terms of developing the case writing skills, because it is an art. You have to have that partnership, right, to have access to the case story, because it has to be a real case story in a real situation. In some cases, you'll actually have the decision maker come into the classroom to talk about, after the students have analyzed it, what did they do? And so it's really brings that learning experience to life.
Okay. Yeah. I'm thinking, well, duh, case study. That makes sense. And I can see that in business, and also like Kim's field, in medical and health, you see it used a lot. Like, how do you go about maybe finding ways to do it for disciplines where maybe it's not done as much? Like, do they do case studies in math or engineering?
Well, I'm sure they do. I have to keep in mind, we're just starting. This is our first issue, and we have, great aspirations to bring in other disciplines. But, Fatih could he's an engineering background. He could perhaps talk better.
Oh, look at that. I just picked that out of the hat and I got lucky.
That's one of the reasons I wanted to jump in. I'm coming from engineering background. I teach now supply chain and operations management courses. But when I was in the engineering faculty doing my PhD, and for some time I also taught in the engineering classes, the case study is not the real thing when you're teaching engineering classes. But we sometimes use scenarios, but scenarios are just made up situations. So when I started teaching in the business school, and in the first 1 or 2 years, I wasn't too much familiar with the case studies. And I just went on teaching with traditional content and etc. And then I was introduced to through some colleagues about teaching with case studies, and I really enjoyed it. I really liked it, and I started teaching with case studies, which are real life situations, as Jane examples, rather than scenarios that are made up. So, and then I really enjoyed teaching it, and I said, why not starting to write some of those case studies? And I wrote a case study that was already in my portfolio, that coming from my own experience, and it went well. I published it in one of those regular journals. And then through this committee work, this case research development committee, I was introduced to open educational resources in the last 2-3 years. And then when the opportunity arose, and then we started to build case studies through research with industry partners. And then now we're publishing in our own open access case, teaching case journal. So yeah, in different fields it's different, but in business and management courses, teaching case studies are really effective teaching tools, but may not be in every field as of now.
Oh, it makes sense to me. I came across, what was I looking at? There's a platform called Scholar RX. It's for the medical field, and their system is built so every piece of content, every chapter starts with a case example, like a situation. And so to me, that really appeals to ground learning something in something that makes sense in terms of a person in the world who's dealing with it.
So this is great, because I'm working with a faculty member in the business school who is doing case studies with his students, but they're all locked up inside Canvas. And I'm trying to work with him to talk about how it might benefit his students' experience to open that up a bit, or to do some collaborations with other courses. So that's something. I mean, I literally just before this, I was late to this because we were having a session, which these are all open. This is another thing we do, that about every other week we have these 1-hour open sessions. And this last one was on peer engagement through peer review, with some interesting and kind of counterintuitive research on that. But one of the faculty members was a math instructor who was doing technical writing with her math students. And this fits perfectly. It's kind of a different genre, but follows the same kind of contours. Then these students too could be working in the open with this. And it would really benefit, I think, both parties, teaching and learning sides. But it's again, that convincing people to try it out, to run that risk, and then, finding the platforms and stuff to do. It's easy. It's that working with them to actually open up. So maybe through some collaboration and seeing some of these different, where you're doing it, for instance, Jane, maybe there'd be an opportunity for this faculty member to see some more value there, or a different lens on it.
Yeah, I'd be happy to collaborate. And that's the other thing I wanted to mention in terms of appeal. We have a peer review process in place, right, which helps So we do kind of help generate the skills, but the journal has a peer review. So if, faculty are interested in submitting the work or, collaborating, we'll provide feedback and, as well in terms of doing that. But I think the collaborative part of this whole project is what's really helped us to gain success in having our first issue published last week as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's kind of a theme in my experience working with open education that, no profit, without honor, in his own land, that nobody wants to hear me trying to convince them anymore, but we need people to see the examples from outside and to work with people outside. And that when we can make that happen, that's awesome.
So maybe I'm curious, what was the impetus to do organize a research journal around this? Is it to advance the practice? Is it to I'll leave it at that.
I think from my perspective, I'll let Kim and Fadi talk about their ideas, but from my perspective, it was, basically to have more materials, the high quality materials available for use in our classroom to really improve that learning experience, to have those relevant, because we're an applied learning institution. So we wanted to have more available, free to use, free to publish, improve quality education. So it really started with that sustainability lens, as well as improving the volume of cases available for our courses, and then to share with others, right? Because our courses aren't so unique that there's not other schools out there that would be interested.
Yeah, and before Kim was the first on, so we got to chat. Do you want to bring up the L word, the license?
Yeah, so I think that's a really good point, because I know that there is some question over OER being totally repurposable. And of course, we've put a non-derivative and open access license on our work. And the reason behind that is these are real stories and real companies, and they've signed off. So we can't have people repurposing those stories. But I think the benefits to the open access teaching case journal is it gives opportunity, because it's free to publish. And we know not all open access journals are free to publish. And they are primarily research journals. And, I'll let Fatih expand upon that. This is a niche that I didn't see in the open world. When I started working with Jane and Fatih, I do want to say we have the case research mentorship development program, and Fatih and Jane were my mentors. This is the first time I wrote a case, even though I've written textbooks before. And so that really provided me an opportunity to learn about case writing and to publish. And we offered that to in-house, but we invite people externally to some of our workshops. So, there's that real developmental approach. And I think there's a good reason for why the license that we chose. It's still free to publish. It's still free to use. It's peer reviewed. The ecosystem we're setting up is that we review for each other. So if you make a submission, we ask you to review. And so any of the other costs are being picked up by the institution. And so there's a lot of benefits to the work that we are doing.
That's
it
great.
really seems like open practices, right? So even, we certainly have a lot of it, as Kim mentioned, we have those processes in place for mentorship, for development of the writing skills, for sharing the resources. So it certainly seems like a lot of those open educational practices apply.
Sorry, Fatih, I think I jumped on you.
No, I also see this as a very effective two-way stream in the sense that it gives the faculty members a real good opportunity to get involved in applied research as well. Just to give you an example, in the last 8 months, I was involved in an applied research that we got some funding from a funding agency, and then we hired a co-op student, and our industry partner needed some improvements in their capacity planning and inventory issues. So together we implemented some lean management approaches and techniques throughout the 8 months. We collected a lot of good information from that, and then we created, now we're in the process of creating the case study, and hopefully it's going to be published in our open access journal. So this way, it's a wonderful opportunity for the faculty member to keep their professional currency up to date, because we're an applied learning, and also create really effective instruction, open access educational resources at the same time.
Thank you. And I'm gonna step in here. I'm gonna come back. Alex, je suis désolé. We don't have French. Is that going to be okay?
Of course it is. As I said at the beginning, it's perfectly fine. I will tease Mustafa,
Yeah,
but it's perfectly fine. And actually, I'm posting in the chat here on
Okay.
StreamYard. Do you perceive that there's a difference in incentives between open education and open access? And some of the incentives for open access really go well with research and having basically promotion, tenure, and reappointment. But do you perceive that there's less of an incentive to work in open ed overall for teachers, and it's harder to convince people, or it's a gateway, or how do you perceive that?
I can start. So I would say in the work that I've been doing, and a lot of I almost feel like I'm a marketer. So I go to lots of leadership meetings, faculty meetings, and every time I'm in the room, I have buy-in. So people are interested, and I think it's still awareness. I still think awareness is a big one, and tying it to scholarly outputs has been really important. Connection that I think people, it resonates with them, and I have even more buy-in. And then now, post-pandemic, it's even become easier because there's just so much less restrictions to use open educational resources, and there's so much more available, and it's high quality. People are looking at repurposing that and adding in their own content. Because while I am supporting the Open Access Teaching Case Journal, I also support open educational resources. And we have, like, in the last year, published, I think, 8 digital textbooks, along with some other, and tons of adoptions. So I don't actually have all the stats because it's just happening too fast. But just to give you an idea, like it's definitely, people are interested.
I just wanted to throw in here, I think, we have 3 intertwined things here, right? We have kind of open access journals, we have open education resources, and then we have the open education thing that weaves through all 3 of them. I certainly see that open access, which faculty understand because they see the similarities to other kinds of publishing, is more interesting typically than open education, and even open education resource. And part of that's because most university faculty aren't that interested in teaching. That is either not their primary thing, or there aren't any incentives for them to teach more richly. So they're much more interested in the promotion for themselves. And when it's a gateway, which it sometimes is, that's great. But I do think that open education, the teaching and learning process in the open, and that contribution is 3rd on the tier of interest between open access, using resources, than actually working out in the open. And trying to make those steps, I would put them the other way, I guess, how to move up that ladder is what I'm particularly interested in doing. And it just continues to be a challenge.
Is there somewhat of a factor? I mean, an open access journal or open access publishing, it's pretty clear. It's not completely defined, but conceptually people understand what they're talking about. Open education gets really broad and nebulous. I mean, are we talking about, like, an animated GIF versus an entire published, press book or something like that? So I think maybe the range of what is included under that category is where it gets kind of like murky.
Absolutely. That's kind of why I like to see more happening in the open, where we can actually say, here's a specific thing that's happening in a course that it is actually open in the open teaching and learning process, versus showing a journal, or versus, the wide universe. Hey, let's do this thing and let's explore the universe. That's challenging.
Your comments were just making me think of what I learned this morning with Nate shared the bingo with its kind of different aspects of openness, and that it would always change, and there was always one box open because it will evolve. And I thought, that what a good perspective, that resonated well with me. Again, that kind of example that we'll take it, there'll be aspects that are great with the whole education process, even with a program or a course or a certain even particular resource, and then evaluate it, not necessarily kind of measure it, but evaluate it to see where you can improve. And
even thinking, Kim, when we were talking about the no derivatives license, like, I'm just wondering, like, do people make derivatives of journal publications? Like, do they reuse bits of them? Like, you make use of course content, or what we think about remixable OER. So that's why, to me, it's not a problem. I mean, you have a published thing that you're making available openly versus all the stuff that's behind paywalls. And to me, that's a step in the right direction.
I agree. It is a step in the right direction. And I think in order for people that maybe haven't been in the open world before to feel comfortable to publish with us, it's important that we have that protection, and that, so the more people will join. And, that's my hope.
I mean, I see the same thing where people really want the most restrictive license possible because that's what they're comfortable with. It's the closest thing to regular copyright that they can understand. And then hopefully sometimes trimming some of those off. I mean, I've gone back and forth in my own life over the years, and I'm pretty much a CC BY person at most, or if not just, CC 0. But I understand why faculty and people don't necessarily want to do that. And that was part of the session that I attended this week, that I think their point was interesting in that respect about respecting kind of different ideas of privacy and property. But I think you run into some real issues where at some point things just aren't open anymore, even if you're calling them open, if it's so restricted, or you want to look retroactively, or you're so worried. I mean, man, I wish somebody would take my stuff and do amazing thing and terrible things with it rather than just doing nothing with it. I'll cross that bridge of popularity when I come to it.
And let's not forget moral rights, right? Traditional knowledge labels are the ones we hear the most about in the OER scene because it does apply. It can really apply that we need to, respect those labels and to restrict some things about educational resources that are technically open but still need to be restricted in some ways. And because in Canada, our moral rights are relatively weak compared to other parts of the world, and even weaker in the US, right? It's not even mentioned in copyright law. In Canada, there's a few things, including the right to your own image. That's the one that we have in Quebec. So there's a whole thing about the licenses are a big part of the story for OERs. They're not necessarily a big part of the story for open education itself. And they're part of the story for open access. Open access itself is not about education, technically, right? It's really about open research. It goes really well with open notebooks, like open science through open notebooks. In which case, people do take apart a research article that has been published and do something else with it. But it's not the same way as we adopt and adapt open educational resources. So I think, and just to push back a little bit on something that was said earlier about university teachers not being interested in teaching, which I've lived, I've taught in universities for 20 years. The thing about it is that I now work in a context like the colleges I was talking about that are across Quebec, like there are 48 CEGEPs that we call, and I'm not doing Quebec explaining to some of you, but because it's on YouTube, just to say that those are tuition-free colleges that are available to anyone, and there are programs that are professional programs, there are programs that are pre-university, and they tend to be very useful to get people to democratize education. It's been going on for more than 50 years. Something about it is that the points teachers are getting are not based on research. It is possible for college teachers to do research, but don't have to. So when they do it because they're passionate. And every college teacher in the system, teaching is their main thing. And because of that, in our context, it's been very easy to focus on the pedagogy of it. It's not just about releasing a resource that happens to be open. It's that the work that is done with the resource is the point itself. Like it's kind of like there's been a thread today that Alan started on Connect about what do we do 7 years after Robin DeRosa was talking about textbooks. We're still doing the same things, and the conversation is still about the resource itself, But turns out David Wiley found that out last summer, that typically the most impact comes from the instructor, the support she receives, and the instructional design. That makes a lot of sense. That's kind of the point of what we do when it's open education itself, is to help people learn. So the fact that we showcase a lot of initiatives, that's really great. Like Chris, you're talking about those, promotions basically of people who talk about what is being done to plan the work, but a lot of the work is not promoted because it happens underground by people who are not known by those who make decisions about programs, right? It's the teacher who will create a wiki about dentistry. 15 years ago, every semester, all of his students are doing an exercise specifically on that wiki, and you go like, that's actual open pedagogy. But nobody knows about it because it's only when he had a technical issue and I just answered the call. It's that kind of thing that what we can do together, probably to act together, like Kim extended the invitation to Chris, to come and, contribute. What we can do in terms of building the community itself. Something that has happened in Quebec for the past couple of years is that just a bunch of us, 40 of us from universities and colleges, got together. We got certified from Creative Commons. So really assessing those issues, including the fact that our collective agreements for professionals don't typically give us the rights to our own work, even though it is the case for teachers that they get their own work. But from those issues, we got together to create a lot of work together. Like it can be the resources themselves, but certainly workshops that we keep doing to bring more people in and to assess those issues, right? I think there's something to be done really just about getting together and, yes, discussing the definitions of open education. That's part of the thread from today. For K-12, like it's probably not a good idea to even mention the term, but to actually just do the work. But to get together to actually showcase what other people are doing at the other side of our communities of practice.
Amen.
Absolutely.
Totally agree.
I mean, and I want to be clear, I'm not slagging on faculty. I think they're in like at UW, they're in a no-win situation for the most part, because if they're teaching lecturers or teaching professors, they have an unmanageable workload. So it's going to be very difficult, right? And if they're tripartite, octopartite, whatever they are, teaching is not necessarily incentivized in that situation. And then once they're promoted, then teaching is not recognized, not supported. The faculty development isn't there. Like it's so minimized in most institutions how important the teaching part is. So when you have that context, then you're trying to break open, you're relying on that intrinsic motivation. And that is something that's difficult to come by when people are in these kinds of situations. So I'm not knocking faculty for being faculty. I'm just saying that the institutions are in many cases broken, and it's hard to work around that, right?
I know I've always looked north for inspiration, right? Whether it was Christina Hendricks at UBC or the whole eCampus Ontario. I mean, Conestoga. I mean, you guys have just, for whatever reason, done amazing work in open education. And I remember being in Arizona and thinking Washington State was like this epicenter of open because Cable Green lived there. And he was the David Wiley, Cable Green, they were like the shining beacons of hope, and I got up here to UW, the University of Washington, and it was like nowhere to be seen, like nowhere. And I think that, maybe in the U.S., just the amount of labor being asked of faculty, particularly around service and these other pieces of the teaching world, is such that, for us, it's just a little teeny group of us in this teaching and learning on the open web who are kind of evangelical about what we're doing, but there's literally 6 of us, so it's hard to make a huge impact with the 6 of us.
Cable's still there. Do you want his home address? No, I mean, definitely the perception, and you know, I'm not going to speak for my colleagues. Like, it's not like we have everything here, but you know, it's interesting. Like, I look to Scotland that way. I was in some sessions this morning, like, you know, stuff that they're able to do on a national scale, and they just shrug their shoulders. And so, like, usually other places tend to look like things are better, but you know, there's the reality there. And so, like, I'm sitting here wondering, you know, talking about some of the things that Chris said, or you know, how often now does someone like say, like, oh, I really just want to do something, I'm going to go create a wiki. like I'm wondering if that self-starter spirit, and a lot of it has to do, Chris, with the workload and of course the aftermath of the pandemic. And so I have a feeling a lot of us are all kind of like, we're frazzled. And what do we do with that?
No, I mean, I agree. It's that kind of pioneering spirit that over time has to change into something else, but it feels like it's become pretty dulled in a lot of cases. And it's sad and hard. And I mean, I feel it too. I mean, I'm not out there blogging as much as I used to and sharing as many things as I used to and kind of just jumping out there as much as I used to, because I'm tired too. I mean, I certainly understand it. It feels like a lot of the circle that's, you know, over the last 20 years has formed and ebbed and flowed. This definitely feels like we're in an ebb tide right now.
All right.
But aren't open educational resources a great way to engage people? I just finished filming a bunch of testimonial videos from faculty that have been involved, and it's been so satisfying, I guess. It's been exciting to hear how completing being part of an open educational resource and publishing has reignited their passion for teaching. And isn't that what the research shows? So maybe we just have to like find those newbies, right, that help us to get re-inspired and go, yeah, that's what it felt like the first time. So
yeah, and I think there's administrative pressure, because what they understand about all of this, in my experience, a lot of administration, is they understand OER is a cost-saving measure to attract students, right? I mean, that's where they come from. And I think with that lens, it makes it hard to make that jump to contributing to OER. And you know what I mean? So I think that's the step we're trying to help people take, because, you know, you can quantify that I'm saving students $120 a quarter by having this open resource, and I implement that, and libraries focus a lot on that at UW, and that's great. Like, I do want to see that adoption. It's wonderful. But that step towards contributing and having the cycle within the open teaching and learning experience, that's the sum I'm trying to make. So it's great you're having people get excited. I think that's ideal, right? Like, they contribute and they get excited and they do more.
If I could say, I think a part of that too is the sustainability, right? So we are a prime signatory, right? Principles for Responsible Management. So if, you know, that initiative, that really leads, you know, to open, and so many benefits there as well. So, you know, we have institutional support for that. You know, we do have our signatory for that. But, you know, I think that sustainability is, you know, across the globe. So, you know, perhaps linking it to that in institutions, trying to see those benefits, those links, then that could help. Because I agree, it's that administration support, the institutional support, that makes a big difference to give you the time and ability to do that. But, you know, that sustainability lens could really help as well.
Hey, Todd, don't you just need like ice cream and cookies? Like,
we've been working on that too. It's so weird that, you know, when anybody sees something that inspires them in the world, in their work, I am hopeful, as a mostly glasses half full person, usually. You know, getting my main job, when I'm doing my job well, I feel, is putting faculty work in front of other faculty in some way, right? And I feel like that's the highest plane I can exist at. And I don't have to do any work, right? It's not me. And it's hard to do that, though. And it's really hard to get it in front of administrators, especially when it often needs explaining, or a little bit of explanation as far as the what goes into making it happen. You know, like, oh, here's a website that it's a press book, you know. I'm not sure they get like that students contributed to it, or that all the little technical pieces that go into it, and that, yeah, but we're working on it. We're trying to put amazing things in front of our faculty, and I don't expect things to change by 4 o'clock tomorrow, but maybe next week.
It's gonna be right after your session, isn't it?
Yeah, that's
Well,
right.
well, it's change management, right? And we all know change management takes time, and this is a big change for a lot of people. And I know people have been at it for quite a few years. And I often say to colleagues that maybe are feeling a bit frustrated is we're just holding the baton for a little while. This is a marathon. It's just our turn to hold the baton, and we're going to pass it on to someone else.
And I told someone else in a message who was very frustrated with her institution is like, it always takes longer than you think it should. And usually just when you're ready to say like, I'm done, like somebody comes around knocking on your door and they're ready for it. So a lot of it is just, playing even a longer than the long game.
The other thing I was thinking of is someone mentions the role of students. I think if you can get the students engaged, because institutions do see that voice, as their opinion. So if you can use materials in the classroom, I had Kim come to one of my classes last term, so use the materials, get them engaged, maybe doing some of the exercises, even some development. That's another way that could help kind of promote and raise the awareness.
Okay, go ahead, Alex.
I literally go ahead.
Speaking of students and basically hope, something that gives me a lot of hope is that student associations tend to get more involved these days. And in fact, some of us have been talking about the national strategy for Canada, and the whole federation of student associations across Canada are part of it, and it's driving a lot of change. Like, they're newbies in that sense, and there will be turnover. But what won't be turned over is the organization itself. So there's a lot of hope there. And even in government, like the government of Canada is actually giving us a lot of hope itself. Like, they're not involved in education itself, but they're doing things, including Canada School of Public Service. They're doing their own open education work. And there's a lot of hope with beyond institutions towards something that's not your administration, but actually the whole network.
Okay, that was great because you asked this question in the chat, and I think it's a great closer. And I just want to thank everybody for this fabulous conversation. This is really what I hope for. Anybody want to say, like Alex already spoke a little bit. What gives you hope? Like, let's end this on a upbeat note.
I mean, these conversations give me hope. I mean, because one, I'm much more isolated than I used to be, but the pandemic hit. And so whether it's face-to-face conversations, which I've had some opportunities for recently, or these kinds of conversations, they give me a lot of hope. And hearing that students are getting together and helping push and promote this gives me hope that maybe we can start seeing that happen here too.
What gives me hope is that every time I come away from a presentation, I have some new people that are interested and curious. So.
We're
going to tell her gently, Jane.
You're muted.
Sorry. Thank
That's
you.
okay.
Sorry. What gives me hope is then, seeing things come into fruition. We had our kind of issue launch last week. So it's hopeful. It's a very long process to get it happen. And that to see it, kind of that tangible development and interest in it for going forward, that gives me hope for sure.
I'll give a super selfish.
Yeah, I'd like to.
Nope.
Yeah, go ahead, Todd.
I got a super selfish answer, but when I can catch myself recognizing that we are improving and it is progress, I count that as a win, because we really are making progress. But some days it's hard to appreciate or really feel, but those moments when I do, I feel like that gives me hope. Keep going.
Yeah, for me, I'm just thinking 2 years ago, I knew almost nothing about open educational resources. Today, there's a lot of things that I need to learn, but at least I'm now involved somehow in it. And we journal that we're trying to move forward with my colleagues. So that gives me hope, as Jane said.
Well, that's great. In fact, I'm going to start using that question. That's a great one to wrap up with, Alex. So I love it. And I just want to thank everybody for willing to play along with this. And so wonderful to meet you, Jane and Fatih, and add you to people I know. And Kim, thank you for doing this and bringing this in. Chris, we're going to catch up. We have to catch up, man.
Absolutely.
I really miss you, and I'm with you. I want to make stuff. And Alex, we're going to keep stirring it up, right? And of course, Todd, you're due a phone call.
Yeah, this is great to meet people and to put some names to faces. I've seen Alex's name around for quite a while, it seems like, and and Todd and Alan have been great help for me specifically at where I'm at, and so I like that. Dave Cormier, not so much. I don't know, but
we can give Dave crap anytime. Okay, so there's going to be a video that goes out, and then the broadcast will end. Thank you so much. You folks really make this.
Thank you.
Thank you.